Chapter 64. Still wearing his combat suit, Dunn sat in the command chair, his eyes flicking from one hollow display to another. The creatures had tightened their flying patterns around Mira's shattered aft. He imagined that if he sent out the SV-52 to scout the Derelict's bow, it would be completely clear of the creatures. He initiated a connection with Black and the AI immediately accepted it.
Yes, Captain.
They're forming around the aft.
Yes, Captain. The life forms, all types that we have seen thus far, appear to be conglomerating in that area. Even more curious is the fact the predators seem to have ceased being predators. The pinecones, starfish, and the others are cohabitating without attacking one another.
What the hell are they doing?
I do not have enough information to offer an educated guess.
He rolled his eyes. Then make an uneducated one.
Yes, Captain. I believe the continued blasts inside Mira have left a long-lasting impression in its atmosteel. The last blast that occurred inside it before Gunnery Sergeant Cartwright's squad recovered the beacon may have been more powerful than the previous ones, enough to get the attention of all the life forms that inhabit Mira. The behavior of the new arrivals that wrapped around the skiff further props up that hypothesis.
Dunn leaned back in the chair, his hands behind his head. Blowing up Mira. Do you still believe that is the correct course? Black paused for a moment before replying.
Although I do not have all the facts, my simulations, based on behavioral observation, give a 70% chance that the destruction of Mira will scatter the life forms. Without a safe haven, it is likely they will hone in on the beacon and follow it.
So that's a yes. Black seemed embarrassed.
Yes, Captain. It is still the recommended course of action.
Dunn nodded and broke the connection. He thought for a moment before leaning forward in the command chair. Oaks, bring our starboard side directly parallel to Mira's aft. Black, how's our ammo supply?
We still have a number of CO2 warheads as well as the neutrino type. Standard ammunition will have to do once we exhaust our supply.
Understood. Oaks cleared his throat. We're underway, sir. Lieutenant Talby to the bridge, Dunn said over the shipwide comms. Marines, prepare for multi-G acceleration. Dunn flicked his eyes back to the holo displays. 4 more KBOs had shown up. Black and PEO had missed their approach, but they were here now. He'd little doubt they were breaking apart and headed to the aft just like the rest. He heard the clunk of grab boots on the atmosteel deck and couldn't help but grin. Here, sir, Talby said from behind him. Dunn rotated his chair to stare at his XO. Dark stains covered the visible collar of his jumpsuit. Good work, James. Thank you, sir, Talby said, his face still as stone. Seeing as how Gunny is currently unavailable, I'd like you to do me a favor. Talby cocked his head. And what would that be, sir? A venomous grin spread across Dunn's face. Take fire control. Talby growled low in his throat before saluting. My pleasure, sir. Noble stood in the closed cargo bay with his back against the aft bulkhead, the anti-rad suit still clothing his sweating body. Once the cargo bay hatch had closed and he checked for casualties, both mechanical and physical, he'd headed to this position. What he needed was focus, a place least likely to take damage and most likely to need immediate repair if it was. Besides, this spot, heavily armored. Chances of him getting taken out? Well, the void-damned ship would be in 2 pieces anyway. Somehow that thought didn't make him feel any better. Jacked into Black and the ship's component systems, he'd be the first to know of an impending attack and immediately estimate possible damage and what to do. When under fire, it was part of his job. SFMC still didn't trust combat AIs to use the best judgment, but that didn't mean they should be ignored either. Using the block to communicate and monitor in tandem left the two to have picosecond discussions, come to an agreement, and execute it. Noble's opinion always won if there was disagreement, and it left him very little time to react. Without being fully interfaced, it would be impossible. The block processors assisted the speed of thought, effectively decreasing the time it took to digest input and apply his gut instincts to decision-making. Talby was probably jacked in to the fire controls in the same manner. That was usually Gunny's job. Noble couldn't help but wince at the thought of seeing the old Marine lying unconscious with a brain hemorrhage inside a void-damned autodock. And he might be in that accursed thing until they reached Neptune, or he could just die without ever waking up, without ever knowing if his Marines made it out alive.
Done to Noble.
Go, sir.
We're in position.
He smiled. Copy, sir. Black and I are ready.
Acknowledged. Good hunting.
Aye, sir. The cam feeds dumped into his visual cortex so he could monitor each of the visual sensors. Mira had steadily come into view from bow to stern as Oakes moved the ship to dead center of the aft. It took nearly a minute to get into the right attitude, affording him time to watch the change. The bow had been devoid of any creatures. No pine cones, no starfish, none of the recently arrived. All he saw was the fatigued Atmos steel, the scars of micrometeor strikes, and the occasional ripped hull plate. When the ship had finally come to a stop, he was able to see just how badly the infestation had spread. Mira's aft section was impossible to see now. It was as if the giant ship had held additional hordes beyond imagination, or the creatures were breeding and reproducing at an incredible rate. The further aft you looked, the more there were, piled atop one another like layers of shifting and sliding sediment. His skin prickled as if with electricity, but it wasn't from excitement. It was terror. Where had these things come from? And how the hell were they going to fight that many? They were nearly out of the special ammo already. Suicide, he mumbled aloud.
Lieutenant,
Black's voice broke through the clutter of thoughts like a hammer.
I sense distress.
Well, he thought to himself, at least that prickling feeling is gone. It was true. A flush of embarrassment had all but driven away the fear itself. He didn't like the new AI, and its words stoked another emotion as well. Anger. How the fuck could anyone face this shit and not be distressed?
I'm fine, Black,
he replied through the connection.
Very good, Lieutenant.
Her words had that flavor of warmth and happiness, as if she were enjoying this. Or, he considered, she might just be glad to know you're pulling your shit together. His face twisted into a reluctant grin. For a moment there, he'd almost believed it was true. No, it's a goddamned program they run when they sense their humans are near panic. Sure, that was it. Noble breathed deep, doing his best to get the ice back in his veins. Just like the satellite war. You survived that, you'll survive this.
Talby to Noble.
Here, sir, he said.
Fire control is ready. I'm going to start the sequence in 5 seconds from my mark.
Talby seemed more than a little excited. He sounded like an executioner getting ready to drop the axe on the most loathsome human being he'd ever met. Noble had never heard that tone in the man's voice before. Well, Mira had it coming. Copy, sir, on your mark. Another few seconds passed, as he knew they would. The captain would definitely want to check everything over once more. They had that luxury. Once Talby let loose the missiles, the guns, and the flechette cannons, Mira's ass was going to cease to exist. And when that happened, Noble shuddered again. He already had an evasive maneuvers program set and ready, and he and Black would make changes as they went, dumping plans and replacing them with other presets, modifying, inserting commands on the fly, whatever it took to keep the ship ahead of those things if they decided to attack. Or if they follow the beacon, he thought.
Done to crew. Condition 1. I repeat, Condition 1. Be prepared for hard burn. Fire control, fire at will.
As Dunn's words filtered into his ears, he had time to run 2 more status checks. Everything was still green. They were ready. This was it. It was time. Mark, Talby's voice said. The ship shuddered, but it was nearly imperceptible to Talby. He watched the cam feeds as magnetic pulses pushed 3 missiles from the launchers. Once the projectiles reached a 5-meter distance from the hull, their rockets kicked in. The trio of tritium warheads streaked across the darkness with tails of brilliant blue flame. A second later, they met the creatures on Mira's hull. With the cams zoomed in, he could see from the great ship's belly to her topside. Talby watched with a grim smile as large clumps of the pulsing, moving horde found themselves engulfed in an explosion of heavy water and flechettes. Clouds of limbs, carapaces, mandibles, and void knew what other kind of debris puffed away from the impact sites. The missiles shouldn't have done much damage to the hull, but they had. Giant tears appeared in the atmosteel hull plates. Some shattered and opened great misshapen holes in the already ravaged aft. Inside Mira, something pulsed with colors so unnatural they hurt his mind. Before he had time to reconsider firing the other salvo, his fingers had already done the work. 2 shipbuster missiles, essentially high-yield, low-kiloton nukes, burst from the last launchers. As their rocket engines kicked in, Talby said aloud, "For you, Gunny." The universe around him disappeared in a flare of white light. The visual filters dampened the blinding flash, but that didn't keep the afterimage from appearing behind his eyes. As it slowly faded, he was able to see the damage, and it was still happening. The nukes busted through the fragile hull plates, entered the interior of the engineering bay, and detonated with their payloads. That had been the plan. With the ship in such bad shape, Black had calculated their shipbusters could effectively cut Mira's aft section from the rest of the ship. He didn't realize it would affect all of it. The shock wave from the nukes sent a rippling cascade of energy down every piece of atmosteel, even as the heat melted and twisted the already distressed metal. The separating layers of atmosteel unzipped into strips of ultra-thin metal. The ripple and cascade ate the midships before it hit the bow. Once it reached there, it slowed and finally stopped, leaving 1/3 of the fore section spinning and tumbling into space. Widening cones of debris vomited from the sliced bow section. Mira had effectively been destroyed. Talby had a second to enjoy the sight before alarms flashed across his HUD. He blinked and retrained his focus back to where the giant ship had once been. The stars were going out, disappearing. No, there was one. Then it was gone again. Finally, with a growing sense of horror, he realized what he was looking at. The creatures, the survivors, had massed together into an impossibly black cloud, and it was growing and growing. Talby heard the captain tell Noble to
Punch it.
Then he was pushed into his acceleration couch as if by the universe itself.